Hello, I'm Ben Davis and welcome to this digital photo tutorial where I'm going to show you a fantastic way to create dramatic lighting effects using the tools on offer in Lightroom. Quite often, our photographs don't match up to the experience of absorbing a scene in real life. I want to show you a great way of rekindling that magic that demanded the shot be taken at the time so your images are as dramatic as they can possibly be. To start off, you need to import a RAW file into Lightroom. To do that, simply click on the Import button at the bottom left of the Library module. If you want to work along with the same image as me, you'll find the solsunset.dng in the Start Images folder. Make sure that it's ticked and then click Import. Once it's in, with it selected, click on Develop to enter the Developing module. The first thing I want to do is fix any lens issues, so head down to the Lens Corrections tab, just pop that one open, and within Basic, simply tick Enable Profile Corrections and Remove Chromatic Aberration. Below, within the upright controls, just click Auto, and that's going to fix any perspective corrections. Then, to check that Lightroom has detected the correct lens the image was taken, head over to Profile, and within Lens Profile, check that it is the Nikon 18-200 f3.5-5.6 lens. Now, if you're using your own image, this information will be different. If there's no information here, you can simply select the make and model of the lens from these drop-down menus. And the other thing to do within Profile is to set the vignetting slider to 0 so that we're leaving all of the vignetting present in the image. The next thing I want to do is control the appearance of tones and contrast in the image, and I'm going to do that in the Basic tab. So just scroll up and pop open the Basic tab. We're going to start off with the exposure slider, and I want to reduce the overall exposure of the image so I can get some detail back in the sky. I'm going to set the exposure slider to the left to -1.3. Below this, I'm going to boost the contrast with the contrast slider, so I'm going to push this one to the right and leave it set at around about +40. Below here we have the highlights and shadows sliders, and these are going to let us recover detail in the brightest and darkest parts of the image. I'm going to set the highlight slider to -100 and the shadow slider to +100, and this is revealing detail in those areas. We then have the whites and black sliders, and these allow you to set the white and black point of the image. A little tip, if you hold down Alt on the keyboard as you move the slider, you see a clipping mask, and that shows you the point where either of these start to lose detail. So if I hold down Alt on the keyboard as I move it, I'm going to set whites to the right to around about 35. If I go any higher, you'll start to see the clipping mask appear, and that's showing us that we're losing detail. So I'm going to take it back down to the left. I'm going to leave it set at about +35. The same with the black slider, but I want to take this to the left this time, so I'm going to leave this set at around about -20, so I've just got a little bit of black clipping here in these very darkest areas. Below here we have the present sliders, so just scroll down slightly. We've got the clarity slider first of all, and this is going to affect detail in the picture, sort of definition of edges. I'm going to increase this, so I'm going to set the clarity slider to around about +80. The Vibrance Slider controls the more muted colours in the picture. I'm going to set this at +40, as I want to boost those more muted colours. The Saturation Slider controls all of the colours. I'm going to take this one down a bit to about -10, just to stop the colours from becoming too intense. Below here we have the Tone Curve tab, and this allows you to affect the tones of the image. Now if you open it up and it looks like this with these sliders, just click on this icon here, and this will allow you to edit the point curve. Now we can adjust the tone curve manually. To start off, make sure you're in channel RGB. There's a drop-down list of options there. Click on the point curve to add a control point at the point where these two first quarter lines cross. That's here in the shadows. So I'm going to click to make a control point there. And then I'm going to lift the blacks ever so slightly, about 1/3 of the way towards that first quarter line there, and that's just lifting the blacks in the scene. Now I can also use the Tone Curve tab to warm up the picture a little bit as well. I'm going to change channel from RGB to blue, so now I'm only affecting the blue tones in the scene. I'm going to add another control point, this time in the middle, so I'm not going to be affecting anything below that, and I'm going to click and drag and pull down from the top this time, again about 1/3 of the way towards that first quarter line, and that is just boosting the yellows in the highlights. I'd like to enhance the appearance of the sky even further, and I can do that with the graduated filter. You can select it from the toolbar here or press M on the keyboard for a shortcut. Once you click it open, you get these sliders here. You'll notice that some of these are in different positions. To set them all back to the default 0 position, just simply double click on Effect and they'll all go back to their starting point. To set up this graduated filter, I'm going to start off with the tint slider, and I'm going to set that all the way to 100 to really boost the magenta, because I want to add a sort of a sunset effect, so I want to make the sky a bit redder. The other thing I want to do is take the exposure slider, and I'm going to reduce the exposure slider, so I'm going to take this to minus 0.3, round about there, just so I can darken off the sky a little bit. And also the highlight slider, I'm going to take this down as well to minus 80 to restore some detail in those highlights as well. With that set up, simply click and drag and pull down over the sky, and you'll see the effect the graduated filter has. If you want to reposition it, you can click on this pin here and move it around, and make sure you've got quite a wide feather area. That's indicated by these three lines. If I bunch them up, we have a very abrupt feather area, and you can see there's no softening of the effect, and it doesn't look very subtle. So to have a very subtle effect, make sure you've got quite a wide area as this comes down over the sky. Once you're happy with that, just click Done at the bottom to exit the graduated filter tool. Now, we've already managed to introduce quite a bit of atmosphere back into this picture by clawing back detail in those brighter parts and by enhancing the sky, but the next step is where the magic really happens, and that's using the Radial filter tool, and we're going to use it to create our own sun. Now, there is a sun in our picture, you can see it poking above that building there, but I really want to enhance that effect and then introduce our own sun rays, which are going to be pouring down across our scene. We're going to do that with the Radial filter. It's the one here next to the graduated filter. So you can press Shift plus M on the keyboard for a shortcut, or just pop it open there. Once again, double click Effect to reset these all back to 0. Now, I want to create a sun first of all. I'm going to do that by setting the temperature slider to 20 to add a bit of yellow to the Radial filter that I'm going to be introducing. The exposure slider, I'm going to set this all the way to the maximum value of 4. The sun would be incredibly bright in the sky, so that's the brightest we can go. So I'm going to do that, and I'm also going to set highlights to 100 as well to really blow them out in this area. With that set, simply click and drag and pull, and you'll see this Radial filter shape, and then get hold of the pin and you can move it into position somewhere like that once you're happy with it. If you want to double up this effect to really make the sun really bright, right click on that pin with your mouse and click duplicate, and that's going to add another Radial filter on top of the one we've already put in. If you want to resize the second one, you can click on these control points on the edge of the Radial filter, make it a bit smaller, something like that. We can also use the same Radial filter to create sunbeams that are raking down across our city scene. To do that, click New, because we want to set up a new Radial filter with slightly different settings here. So click New, and I want to leave temperature set to 20, but the exposure I want to reduce. I'm going to take it down quite a long way to somewhere around about 0.85, something like that in there. I'm going to leave highlights set to 100 as well, because I want to make the sun rays effect where we're going to lose highlights in those areas as if the sun was striking across it. So just as before, you can click and drag, but rather than making a circular shape, pull it into like an elongated finger shape. So we can pull it down somewhere like that. If you're not quite happy with it, once again, you can get hold of these control points on the edge to adjust the shape and size. I'm going to make it a little bit wider. And then with the pin, click it and drag it to move it into position. And I want the first one there coming from the sun straight down here across the scene. To double up this effect, to make it a bit brighter, I'm going to right click on the pin and click duplicate. I'm happy with that, but I'm going to right click and click duplicate again. But now this time that's too bright. So I'm going to get hold of that pin and move it across to the next position, and then if I move my mouse outside of the Radial filter, I've got this rotation arrow, so I can click and pull and get it, rotate it around, so I want that coming from the same sun position, pouring down on that part of my scene. To brighten this one again, I'm going to right click and duplicate, and then once again right click and duplicate. Too much, so it looks like 2 is enough, so I'm going to move it across and then rotate it around, get that sunbeam coming from there. I'm going to right click and duplicate, and then for a third time, I know that's too much, so once again move it up and rotate it across, something like that. Right click and duplicate, and I'll do one more, right click and duplicate, and take that one up there and rotate it around like so. Now I can go back to any of these pins and adjust them. Now all of these sun rays are currently the same size, and they wouldn't be as they'd be glinting across the top of this building. So I'm going to make this one a bit smaller. So click on that arrow there and pull it in just to make it a bit smaller, and same with this one as well. I'm going to make it a bit thinner as it's coming across like that. I'm happy with the others, so I'm going to leave them all alone. And the other thing I want to do with the radial filter is to add a big pool of light at the bottom here, as if these sun rays were striking down and lighting up the road. I'm going to leave the same settings as we've got for these sun rays, so I'm going to click and pull, something like that. Now it's not in the right place, so once again I'm going to get hold of the pin and move it down across there. I could right click and duplicate and see, have a look, but for me that's too bright. So this time I'm going to right click on there and click delete. I've still got the one underneath, there it is, I can move it around, but I've just got rid of that double layer because it was too bright. Now with our sun effect created, all you need to do is click done to exit the radial filter tool. The next thing I'd like to do is increase the sharpening of this image. So if you scroll down here along these tabs along the right hand side and open the detail tab. Here you've got a window so you can monitor the effect of sharpening that's going on in the picture. You can click on this target tool and then pick somewhere in the image that's got some nice strong edges. I'm going to pick this 21 on this sign here and click on there, and now I've got it so I can monitor the effect that these sharpening sliders are going to have. Start off with the amount slider. This controls the overall amount of sharpening that's being applied to the image, and I want to set this to 95, somewhere pretty high. I want to add quite a lot of sharpening. The radius slider controls the size of the edges which are affected by sharpening, and I want to increase this from 1 to 2 to make those edges a bit chunkier. The detail slider controls the overall amount of fine detail within that's the sharpening, and I want to increase this as well, so I'm going to set this to 80. Now the masking slider is probably the most important of the lot. This controls where sharpening is applied to the image. You don't want to sharpen areas that haven't got any edges. If you're sharpening areas that lack detail, you're going to start introducing sort of image artifacts into the picture, which reduces image quality. To have an idea of where is being sharpened, once again, if you hold down the Alt key on the keyboard as you move the masking slider, you get to see an edge mask. Now at the moment, the masking slider is set to 0, so that means sharpening is happening everywhere. You can see this when you hold down Alt and grab hold of the slider. Everywhere is white, and anywhere that is white is being sharpened. As we move the slider to the right hand side, the black on the mask show those areas aren't being sharpened. Now I only want to sharpen the stronger edges, so I'm going to keep this slider going to the right hand side, and I'm going to leave it set somewhere round about there at 95, so I'm only sharpening those stronger edges in the picture. You can let go of Alt on the keyboard and your image is returned to the screen. The final thing to do to boost the sense of drama in the picture is to add a vignette. If you scroll down to the Effects tab and open that one up, we have the post-crop vignetting controls. The amount slider allows you to add a dark or a bright edge to your image. I want to add a dark one, and I'm going to leave this set somewhere at around about -40. The midpoint controls where the center of the vignette is, and I'm going to take this one to about 55 just to take it a bit further away from the middle, closer towards the edge. The roundness slider controls the shape of the vignette. They can either be more spherical or more square, following the edges of the frame. I want to take the slider to -30 so it's a bit more of a square vignette. The feather slider is pretty important. I'm going to set this to 100 as this creates a nice soft edge for the vignette effect. The highlight slider as well. This will allow any highlights that are under the effect of the vignette to come through so they're not being influenced. I'm going to set this also to 100 as well, so therefore our sun up here in the sky isn't being darkened by the vignette effect. With that done, I just want to pause for a moment to take a look at our journey. If I press the / key on the keyboard, this takes us back to the original unedited file. You can see we've got the really bright sky that's lacking any detail, and the rest of the scene looks a bit flat and there's not that much interest. But with just a few simple steps in Lightroom, we've really brought out the detail back in those lost areas and introduced these fantastic sunray effects, which really gives this rush hour sunset scene a great sense of atmosphere. The very last thing to do in Lightroom is to export your file, and this means you'll then create another version of it on the desktop or somewhere else that you can then use elsewhere. To do that, you need to click File and then Export. The first thing to decide is the location of your new file. At the moment it's set to the desktop and I'm happy with that, so I'm going to leave it alone, or you can click on Choose and navigate to another location. File naming, I want to rename this image to a custom name. I'm going to call this Soul Sunrays. And then scroll down, you've got the file settings. At the moment it's set to image format is the JPEG. I'm happy with that. There are other options here though if you need them. I'm going to leave quality set to 90. because I do want a pretty high quality and I don't want to resize the image. So that's all looking good. So all you need to then do is hit export, and that file will then be created on the desktop. Well, that's it for this tutorial. I hope you found it enjoyable and informative, and that you'll try out this technique on your own images and see what effects you can create. So until next time, thanks for watching and goodbye.